I come from a 19th century country, Canada, and this gives me a great advantage in looking at the 20th century.
The 20th century is the age of electric technology. It's the most dominant tool of our time. And reevaluate every thought and every institution you formerly took for granted.
I know exactly where the boundaries begin. Mostly they begin in the United States. So any Canadian can see what you cannot see. That is, you live in the 20th century, more or less, and it becomes therefore invisible.
The electric age is changing you. It is changing your family. It is changing your neighborhood. It's changing your education. It's changing your job. When are you going to do? It's changing your government. It's changing your relationship to others. These little circuits are making our world go. The electric age is having a profound effect on us. We are in a period of fantastic change that's coming about at fantastic speed. Your life is changing dramatically, and you are numb to it.
Well, obviously his ideas are complex. I mean, he's an intellectual.
A special kind of intellect.
And his ideas are in the realm of intellect. They're complex ideas. But our society is a complex society. There are many people who want things, simplified. Of course, if intellect spoke in simple words, then people like me would be out of work.
Well, the title, the medium is the massage, is a teaser, a way of getting attention. There's a wonderful sign hanging on a Toronto junkyard which reads, "Help beautify junkyards. Throw something lovely away today." And this is a very effective way of getting people to notice a lot of things. And so the title is intended to draw attention to the fact that a medium is not something neutral. It does something to people. It takes hold of them, it roughs them up, it massages them, it bumps them around, and as it were, chiropractically. And the general roughing up that any society gets from a medium, especially a new medium, is what is intended to be indicated in that title.
The medium of our time, electric technology, everything from the light bulb to the telephone to the computer to jets to nuclear energy, is changing everything. We are in the middle of a tremendous clash between the old and the new.
The medium does things to people, and they're always completely unaware of this. They don't really notice the new medium that is roughing them up. They think of the old medium because the old medium is always the content of the new medium, as movies tend to be the content of TV, and as books used to be the content, novels used to be the content of movies. And so every time a new medium arrives, the old medium is the content, and it is highly observable, highly noticeable. But the real roughing up and massaging is done by the new medium, and it is ignored.
The idea that television, computers, and the rest are just tools that we use for better or worse isn't true. The way you react to them is what's important, not what's in them or on them. How you use your eyes to see, your ears to hear, brings about new forms of human association and action.
The way we refer to this new situation created by the new television massage or treatment of our senses, and it is an evaluation made by the old visual types looking in the rearview mirror as usual of something that is threatening the old values and reversing the old values.
When information is brushed against information, the results are startling and effective.
We are re-entering the old tribal world But this time we're going to go through the tribal dance and the tribal dream wide awake.
The search for involvement and fill-in takes many forms.
It's like drawing cartoons. You can't fill in all this because none of these things happen without some sort of cause or some sort of reason in the minds of other people. The discotheque, the go-go, as a form, is an area in which anybody who takes time can make interesting discoveries. Many of the things I talk about I find very irritating. That's what leads me to investigate them. You know, you look around for a hair of the dog that bit you. I look into many of the new forms simply because I find them very exasperating and irritating and troublesome to peace of mind and so on. And on the other hand, I've discovered, to my amazement, that if you take some violent and irritating process, say like radio or TV, and start looking at how it works, what it's doing to you, and why it's doing it to you, you can get very enthralled, very excited.
Television has been labeled sterile.
There is nothing sterile about television, except in the eye of the beholder. The FCC type of observation of television, the totally irrelevant, totally incapable of coming to grips with this form. When you speak of sterility, you speak of the movie programs that are shown on TV. You're not talking about television at all.
Marshall Mcluhan is a professor of English at the University of Toronto and director of its Center for Culture and Technology. He's the author of several books and hundreds of articles whose sales increase daily and spreads. Suddenly, everybody, press, industry, corporations, and the new youth, have discovered him, and he has become a storm center of extreme controversy.
My largest objections to his principle is that he's basically, and this is a distilled view of what I've gotten from his work and from his presence, a whimsical sociologist rather than a penetrating philosopher or a deep-thinking psychologist.
The ordinary child of our culture is being educated, massaged by the TV form into a state of participation in all sorts of sensuous operations that the old visual culture carefully refrained from and kept distant from.
The week after the book came out, you suddenly heard professors starting talking about the grain and the medium is the message, and suddenly all these little slogans, were all just being picked up, like that, and it became sort of rather sort of mud.
Why should in the TV age scuba diving or skin diving suddenly become popular? I would say right offhand, the reason is very simple. TV watching is scuba diving.
I do believe he is a popularizer. I do believe in 5 years we will look back at this book and perhaps shrug our shoulders. I don't think it's of long or lasting influence.
The movie has become progressively better understood since TV. It has become an art form. It is being given all sorts of special consideration and is even being used as a recruiting center for political talent and other show business.
I think Mr. Mcluhan seems to be awake to all of the media of modern life, certainly, and he understands, perhaps either intuitively or with his very broad intelligence, the meanings of the various major art movements, including pop art.
Now that we have an electronic sort of world, we live imaginatively in the old frontier world of, horse opera.
Salinger was the great hero, and strangely enough, for another group, A.A. Milne. So it doesn't have to do with adulthood or maturity necessarily. I believe some of these are fads. However, Mcluhan, aside from youngsters who are now involved with Lord of the Rings in the same way, has some interesting things to say. And the fact that Madison Avenue got more involved with him than perhaps academia, and I'm talking about faculty level at academia, I believe is revealing.
The fact is the telephone speeds up all patterns of human interrelationship so that all kinds of decision-making, all kinds of organizational life inside business and in the community are changed completely.
His writing style is extraordinarily up-to-date. It has a kind of swing to it that mediates between highfalutin scholarship and ad writing. And when you read that, although it doesn't read clearly all the way, somehow the cumulative effect of it is that you understand much better than if you heard some stuffy scholar talking in a classroom.
To me, this is his role. He's talking about goggles, you know, and everybody's got a set of goggles. Everybody thinks his own set was given to him by God and is universal, natural, and supposed to be. And what he's saying, he says, just for a minute, think of the possibility that maybe your set of goggles is a private, idiosyncratic set of goggles. And suppose that the generation before had a different set of goggles, and you got this set of goggles, and you both think you're looking at it the same way, and you're not.
No, the praise is not completely unanimous. Though Life has labeled him the oracle of the electric age, and the Herald Tribune said he may be the most important thinker since Newton, Darwin, Freud, and Einstein, he has also been called the high priest of pop culture, the intellectual celebrity, and even that nut professor in Canada.
People being excited by Mcluhan is that he really has a great knack for developing slogans, you know, like the medium is the message and the channel and the information, those sorts of slogans, and they're very appealing. I really have nothing against Marshall Mcluhan, except that he got everything from Norbert Wiener, who was a mathematician.
The medium I employ is the probe, not the package. That is, I tend to use phrases, I tend to use observations that tease people, that squeeze them, that push at them, that disturb them, because I'm really exploring situations. I'm not trying to deliver some complete set of observations about anything.
I don't think he makes a decision. I don't think he commits himself, which, depending on your view of where our art is going, would either make him a potentially great artist or not one at all.
I'm an investigator. I explore, and instead of explaining, I explore.
Our time is a time for crossing barriers, for erasing old categories, for looking ahead.
Ordinary people prefer to live in the immediate past, bonanza style. That is, modern suburbanite livers in USA live not in modern suburbia, they live in bonanza land. One stage back, the Cartwright territory is a much more comfortable territory to live in than modern suburbia. That is, emotionally, it is much more gratifying and secure to live in bonanza land, and it is the old environment. Every time a new environment forms with a new medium, people go back and live in the old one. When the Cartwrights were actually running USA, say back in 1850, 1870, people weren't living on the frontier at all. They didn't live in bonanza land when bonanza land actually existed. They were living back in Jeffersonian democracy.
Are you living in today's world?
In the new electric world, where everybody is involved in everybody, where everybody is involved in complex processes that are going on in the total environment, the old identity cards that used to constitute private identity, the old means of finding out who am I, will not work. People now have to encounter themselves in the inner world, Kierkegaard or existential style, in order to know who they are. The old methods of merely external identity by marks of occupation, national origin, age grouping, and so on, these will not serve any longer as means of distinguishing private identity.
How much do you make? Have you ever thought about suicide? You are fast losing your private identity. Information is being collected about you, and it's being recorded in a corporate memory, making up one big computerized gossip column. Is unforgiving, unforgetful. And so it goes, every minute of every day. You're the mass man, the collective store of all that ever happened. The walls of your rooms are coming down. It's becoming a simple matter to wire and pick out of your homes your private, once solely personal life and record it. Bugging is the new means for gathering information, Who knows? Maybe you've been bugged for sound. It couldn't happen. What's that buzz?
Privacy was almost unknown, even in Shakespeare's day. It came in after that period, in the 17th, 18th centuries, and it was dependent upon an architecture that sealed off spaces. People didn't live in private spaces in earlier periods, and it was with the coming of the book and the need for areas in private areas in which to read and study and so on that privacy gradually caught on as a value. I don't think privacy has quite the same meaning in our time that it used to have. I know, for example, a big business in Toronto where all the private offices have been dissolved, all the walls have been pulled out so that the participants in this business can sit together around tables in the middle of the big office space so that they can watch each other's responses to stocks and world events and so on. They want a perpetual dialogue going on among themselves as a response to world events.
The family circle has widened, Mom and Dad. The world pool of information, constantly pouring in on your closely knit family, is influencing them a lot more than you think. The instantaneous world of electric informational media involves all of us, all at once. Ours is a brand new world of all at onceness. Time, in a sense, has ceased, and space has vanished. Like primitives, we now live in a global village of our own making, a simultaneous happening.
Global village is not created by the motor car or even by the airplane. It's created by instant electronic information movement. The global village is at once as wide as the planet and as small as a little town where everybody is maliciously engaged and poking his nose into everybody else's business. The global village is a world in which you don't necessarily have harmony. You have extreme concern with everybody else's business and much involvement in everybody else's life. It's a sort of Ann Landers column writ large. And it doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement in everybody else's affairs. And so the global village is as big as the planet and as small as the village post office.
We now share too much about each other to be strangers to each other.
For example, in the age of the information explosion, all the walls go out between age groups, ethnic groups, between family groups, national groups, between economies. The walls all go out. People suddenly have to adjust themselves to this new proximity, this new interrelationship. And merely to tell them that this has happened isn't very helpful. What they need to know is, if it is happening, what does it mean to me? For example, in the matter of, say, automation and jobs. Information at electric speeds blows out all the partitions between jobs, involves people in firms, in operations that are total and inclusive, so that big business has discovered that instead of a person occupying a little specialist slot in the business, it's better to work with small teams that can take overall cognizance and consideration of the whole operation of the firm, and come up with all sorts of new solutions for factors that affect the entire operation of the firm, instead of just going ahead doing their little job in the old pattern. Same way with private lives. What had formerly been private life tends to become more and more corporate.
Today, the information level of education in the classroom is far below the level of modern home environment of electronic information.
The reason that the 19th century child could take the curriculum and the schoolroom of his time with some seriousness was that he knew there was a considerable relation between what was going on in the schoolroom and what was going on outside. That is no longer true. We still go on 19th century style with classified subjects, instruction by stenciling on brain pans, and regurgitating in exam form. This is all 19th century factory system schoolwork, but it's no longer supported by the outside environment. The electronic environment makes an information level outside the schoolroom that is far higher than the information level inside the schoolroom. In the 19th century, the knowledge inside the schoolroom was higher than the knowledge outside. Today it is reversed. The child knows that in going to school he is, in a sense, interrupting his education.
Education must shift from stenciled instruction to discovery, probing, and exploration. The young today want roles. They want total involvement now, rather than just fragmented, specialized jobs or goals. How can our youth look forward to a specialized job when the computer world of automation may eliminate that job?
The reason that our educational system is in crisis is because we don't know how to stop this flow of data, this one-way flow of data onto the brain pans of the unfortunate and helpless students.
All media or technologies work us over completely. They are so permeating throughout in their personal, political, psychological, moral, ethical, and social consequences that they leave no part of us untouched.
Any new medium changes the image we have of our own bodies. For example, the motor car is a vast extension of our feet, and it turns you into a paraplegic in a powered armchair, as it were. But it changes completely the image we have of our bodies. With television, the image we have of our bodies is profoundly altered by the fact that the image goes inside us, and this has had a profound effect on the motor car. The safety car is partly the response or the effect of television on the motor car. Involvement in the motor car in a new way makes people feel that it's something they ought to be able to control and from which they might expect a certain degree of safety. This is very much a TV effect on motor car. It may destroy the motor car. But the image we have of our own bodies is completely altered by any new medium. Color television is not the old black and white television with color added. It is a new medium. It completely alters the image we have of ourselves. Our body percepts, as the psychologists say. Our body percept is something of which we are always unconscious. Your body percept changes directly with any alteration in temperature, any alteration in sound, any alteration in input through any of the senses affects your body image. Of this you are completely unaware. Only a psychiatrist can really make you aware of the image you have of your own body.
All media are extensions of some human faculty, mental or physical. The wheel is an extension of the foot. The book is an extension of the eye. Clothing is an extension of the skin. Electric circuitry is an extension of the central nervous system. The extension of any one sense displaces the other senses and alters the way we think, the way we see the world and ourselves. When these changes are made, men change. Before the alphabet, our primary sensory organ was the ear.
The great power of the phonetic alphabet, as discovered in antiquity, consisted in creating a means of translating all languages and all human activities into a common set of symbols which were quite neutral and non-involving. Literate culture, as discovered by the Greeks and practiced by the Romans, created civilization in the sense that it created a high order of civilized culture from which people could detach themselves. That is, literate culture is visual and detached. It creates the civilized man, the detribalized man, the man who is not involved. And the effect of the electric revolution is to create once more an involvement that is total.
We are unaware of the dangers of not understanding the need for involvement.
The dangers are total. The chances of your understanding anything going on in your own time are very small, except through the means or media provided by artists. Artists are people who enjoy living in the present.
Since the time of the Renaissance, we have been contained by a visual monopoly. Art was rigid and kept us out of the frame. Today, art is anything you can get away with.
My own way of testing the sorts of effects that any new form is likely to have on us is to keep a sharp lookout on changing styles in the arts. The artist is always a jump ahead of technology and is engaged really in giving you images of what sort of effects it's likely to have upon you later on. So that the changing style in the arts, like pop art and so on, are pretty good indications of the real meaning of television. Pop art simply tells you the only art form left for you today is your own natural environment. You have now to program it as if it were a work of art and an environment. So to suddenly be confronted with the need to use the human environment itself as art form is one way of drawing attention to the fact that the new environments created by new media require a certain amount of human programming and control for our psychic life. Why should art and culture suddenly become very big business, like big science? The reasons are tied up with the fact that we're living in an information age. When you live in an information age, culture becomes big business, education becomes big business, and the cultural explosion or the information explosion becomes itself culture. It knocks down all the walls between culture and business, as between education and business. There's no longer any gap between the campus and the Wall Street or very big business. If anybody can participate in this whole area of exploration and discovery, and so I try to tease people and to urge them to get into these activities of discovery. Children love it. You can quickly get them going because one reason being they sense that here is an area in which I can become far more expert than my teacher. What about pop art? Why pop? Why not mom? Art used to be mom's province. Suddenly, pop art. It's a pun.
Puns, jokes, humor as a system of communications and as a probe of our environment. It doesn't deal in theory, but in immediate experience. And it's often the best guide to our changing times.
One of the strange features of our time is the joke without the storyline. Simply the gag, like the surgeon, the expensive surgeon who, when his patients couldn't afford surgery, would offer to touch up the x-ray for free. Or the Polish jokes like Alexander Graham Kowalski, the first telephone pole. That was the first Polish joke I ever heard. One of the best. It's possible, or the what's purple and hums? Why, naturally, an electric grape. Well, why does it hum? Doesn't know the words. And these jokes have no storyline. They're just conundrums, and the kids eat them up. They think the old storyline jokes are for strictly square. In the electric age, you don't have a continuity in the old sense. You don't have a strung out continuum. Everything happens at once. Everything goes over everything else, and so everything affecting everything else. There are many examples of this, and it helps to bring to mind that every joke really reveals a grievance. Humor comes out of a world of unhappy, bitter grievances. Hence, many of the jokes in our society, most of the jokes in our society, the good ones, come from ethnic groups, various minorities who have some sort of gripe.
My name? Jose Jimenez.
Clothing as a means of communication? Don't you think they're trying to tell you something?
The whole world of teenage dress is a world of icon in one hand, in the sense that they stress all sorts of images with strongly marked bounding lines. But these images, the costumes that they prefer, are the ones that highlight role-playing rather than individual identity. They would rather be involved, well, for example, a judge with a wig doesn't represent any private entity whatever. He is a role, a function in the whole society. The surgeon in his white coat, the scientist in the white coat, this is role-playing, and this appeals deeply to the young, the teenager type. The wearing the long hair, the beards and so on, this suggests involvement in depth in role. And it's not a private identity so much as a corporate one. The new teenage craving, and unconscious, they are not quite unaware of why, is to drive toward corporate involvement in role-playing. Role-playing has been a game going on in management centers and so on for years as a way of discovering who am I in this organization. Popular hit parade music is still very close to speech patterns. One of the things about the Beatle music, for example, that is so effective is that they were the first, as far as I know, to put English popular speech, popular lower-class British Cockney rhythms and Liverpool rhythms into musical form. The English have never had a music directly related to popular speech before. When you make a music that is related to popular speech, it enables the singer to put on the whole audience, the public, as a mask and wear it as a mask of power. The Beatles are powerful. Any popular music is powerful because it puts on the rhythms and the patterns of the whole audience as a mask.
John Cage, a composer of new music, has stated, "Everything we do is music. Everyone is the best seat. Theater takes place all the time, wherever one is. And art simply persuades one that this is the case. One must give up illusions about ideas of order and expressions of sentiment. Accept that a man is a man, and a sound is a sound. The ear, like the electric age, is a world of simultaneous relationships."
Television is directing our energies inward. Our children today are growing up as a kind of yogi, a Zen Buddhist bunch of inward-directed people looking seriously into themselves, not just idly selecting some exterior goal, but seeking for some completely meaningful identification with some great process. That's why Youth Peace Corps and so on appeals to children. It's not a job. It's a completely involving role. And so the television, I would say, has had this extraordinary effect of driving Western man inward. Western man has triumphed over nature because he's been oriented outward at the visible world. And now with television, he is being oriented inward to the invisible world. And LSD is merely one little side issue in TV effects.
Television establishes the dynamics of our new age. With its always scanning finger, It reintegrates the human senses, thereby making books obsolete. Books are now art objects. Television demands participation and involvement of the whole being. It was the funeral of President Kennedy that mostly proved the power of television to draw everyone into mass participation. The entire nation and world were simultaneously united in a single emotion and involvement.
Kennedy came into office as the first TV president with a resulting involvement on the part of all age groups in his whole presidency that was quite unexpected, and so that his assassination created a corresponding violence of response that was quite unexpected on all age groups and in many other parts of the world besides our own. A satellite system of broadcasting permits, for example, an immediate participation in events anywhere in the world, ending all news reports. What we call a news report is a verbalized substitute for participation in that event. With satellite broadcasting, you just go to the place and participate directly in the sufferings or the events of that area, floods or whatnot. Whether this will tend to create a new kind of news, I don't know. For example, at the present time, what we automatically think of as news is just bad news. If it isn't bad news, it isn't news. If it's good news, it's likely to be PR or advertising. And it takes an awful lot of bad news to sell all that good news that we have to carry in our newspapers and magazines.
What type of presidential candidates will best lend themselves to television?
Oh, well, they have to be flexible, casual, Will Rogers-ish, Jack Parrish. They have to have a kind of informality and casualness that is suited to the medium. The more ramrodish, rigid types will just not go down with the TV viewing public at all. It's a sort of turning TV over to the casting bureaus, and politics, having become show business, is increasingly in the hands of the casting agencies.
The railroad radically altered the personal outlooks and patterns of our society. It bred and nurtured the American dream. It gave us darkest suburbia and its lasting symbol, the lawnmower. The circuited city of the future will not be the huge hunk of concentrated real estate created by the railway. It will take on a totally new meaning under conditions of very rapid transit and communication.
Well, the city, created partly by the railway as a railhead, the city has undergone strange transformations with the motor car on one hand and the airplane on the other hand. The tendency of the motor car is to extend the city as a ribbon development right across vast territories, so that between here and Boston is like one city. Between here and Washington is a city. And on the other hand, the airplane sort of leapfrogs over those spaces and wipes out roads, wipes out the big city.
We'll work at home in created space, created by electric media, connected to the corporation or boss, not by railroads or roads, but by television and other media. We'll relay information by closed circuit, two-way TV, and by computer systems. The great massive American rush hour will be over, and to hell with driving.
When many of these kinds of developments begin to occur in many forms at once, at very high speeds, then it becomes easy to perceive the pattern. When things happen relatively slowly, it's like still shots on a film. If you look at them one at a time, it's very slow. You don't see very much change. but project them at a reasonable speed, and the pattern of development becomes perfectly evident. We are now living in a world where things change so rapidly that anybody can spot the configuration, the pattern of change. And we're living increasingly in a world of pattern recognition instead of just classified and isolated items. The whole speed up has tended to make everything much more intelligible and understandable than in the past.
The speed of electric communication alone does not allow us to use purely visual material to comprehend the world. They are just too slow to be relevant or effective. We are moving from the habit of data classification, for they refer only to the past, not the present.
Advertising agencies have always been mystified as to why is the storyboard more effective than the final product. And the answer to that is very important. It is that the incomplete form allows the audience more participation than the completed form.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
How many times do you suppose you've heard words to that effect announcing a commercial? Often, probably, since they're sandwiched between the hours of TV viewing time. The quality and entertainment level of the commercial is getting very high. Fierce competition keeps the advertising agencies constantly reevaluating and recreating their images. To get and hold the viewer's attention, the advertisers reach for new ideas. More and more, because of repeated showings, the new approaches become familiar and accepted.
This is the sound of heart. It will beat 72 times in this minute.
The commercial has preconditioned mass viewing audiences to abrupt film cutting with no storylines. Many of the techniques utilized in modern theatrical films.
Fellini and Bergman and such pull the storyline off the film, and the result is that you become much more profoundly involved in the film process. When you put a storyline on a novel or a film, you're much less involved. All right, the detective story. Edgar Allan Poe discovered, you see, that if you take the storyline off the detective story, the audience has to participate and make the story as it goes. And so, paradoxically, pull the storyline off any situation and you get a much higher level of creative participation on the part of the reader or the audience. And the Fellini 8.5 is a world where the audience has to work very hard, same as abstract art. Same as Picasso. Picasso has a picture of man sitting in chair. There's no man, there's no chair. What Picasso was painting was what it feels like for a man to be sitting in a chair. The audience has to work this out and participate in the experience of sitting in a chair instead of just visually identifying chair and man.
Movies are better than ever, but most movies are still hotter than ever. Hollywood often causes revolutions. As 𝓎𝓐 has said, the motion picture industry has provided a window on the world, and the colonized nations have looked through that window and have seen the things of which they have been deprived. It is perhaps not generally realized that a refrigerator can be a revolutionary symbol to a people who have no refrigerators. A motor car owned by a worker in one country can be a symbol of revolt to a people deprived of even the necessities of life. Hollywood helped to build up the sense of deprivation of man's birthright, and that sense of deprivation has played a large part in the national revolutions of post-war Asia.
The conflict going on in Vietnam has a corresponding conflict within ourselves. we have a hot war being reported on a cool medium. And it creates a great deal of distaste and reluctance in the population at large, which is very difficult for most people to understand. So cool is involving, hot is not. My friend is fond of explaining that when he came to this part of New York, the cops told him, if you're ever in trouble, never shout help, shout fire. And he said, if you shout fire, all the windows will go up. You shout help, you'll get nothing. Help is too involving. It demands too much from most people. They're afraid. Fire is not involving. It's a hot medium. You can throw a blanket, throw a bucket, and not be personally involved at all. And so it's an extreme example of this strange conflict between hot and cool. But the movie medium is hot and loves violent events, just as the newspaper is hot and loves violent events. But the TV medium is so involving in the process of whatever's going on that it is cool, and when it handles war and the sufferings of war, it creates an audience involvement which makes war most untakeable. So this Vietnam is our first TV war, and people are finding it not too much to their liking. It may be necessary to ban it altogether from TV from now on.
Media reach out to the very furthermost corners of the world. Hopefully, more and more cool media will be getting there soon to cool the temperatures raised by the hot media like radio and film. Real total war has become information war. The Cold War is the real war front and should be the only war, surrounding and requiring the involvement of everyone, all the time, everywhere. Whenever the bloody hot wars are waged, they are conducted in the backyards of the world with the weapons of the old technologies. The hot wars are tragedies which needlessly kill, maim, and destroy. The latest technologies have made hot wars meaningless, for there can be no victory. The hydrogen bomb is history's exclamation point.
These technologies we play with create an inevitable chain of consequences. These consequences are inevitable only to people who are not paying attention to what's going on or to what they've done. You know, you press a button and start something. It's not inevitable that you must press the button. If you understand what's going to happen when you press it, it isn't you must press it.
These are difficult times because we are witnessing a cataclysmic clash of two great technologies. The print technology of yesterday and the electric technology of today. We approach the new technology with the psychological conditioning and sensory responses of the old. We are faced with possible failure, the attempt to do a job demanded by the new environment with the tools of the old.
People have always been unaware of new environments because they're afraid of them. From the moment of birth, people sense that the environment, the new environment around them, is hostile. It's a real threat to their whole existence. And so every time an environment changes, we hasten to seek security and comfort in the old environment. I was delighted to come across a passage in Shakespeare a few days ago, a familiar passage, which suddenly revealed the same message. One touch of nature makes the whole world kin, that each, with one consent, pursues newborn gods, though they be made and molded of things past. The new is always made up of the old, or rather what people see in the new is always the old thing, the rearview mirror. And what people see at any time, what their attention is focused upon, is always the rearview mirror, never the present image or the present fact. The future of the future is the present, and this is something that people are terrified of.
The past went that-a-way. When faced with a totally new situation, we tend to attach ourselves to the objects, to the flavor of the most recent past. Suburbia lives imaginatively in bonanza land. We look at the present through a rear view mirror. We march backwards into the future. There are detracting voices who cry out, "The stars are so big, the earth is so small. Stay as you are." But can we afford to?
He was a presence which you had to either acknowledge and use, or if you didn't use him, you had to say why you didn't use him.
So if not everybody has to read Mcluhan, but if writers, ad men, television producers read him and act upon some of his insights, then
touches everybody.
It touches everybody.
But the thing with Mcluhan, and this is why the current distraction and everything like that, and it's part of what he's talking about. He's a victim of his own theories as well as the creator of them, is the fact that the time span, which in Freud would have gone over 10, 15, 20, 40 years, is now happening to this guy in 18 months.